Hi everyone, this is Double Canopy. I'm Joe. Today we have Martin Melendrez. He is a soil scientist and owner of Soil Secrets in Los Lunas, New Mexico, where he makes incredible amendments for soil, including mycorrhiza, humus, and carbon matrix, and probably more, I'm sure. But we'll get to that. He helped popularize the concept of the soil food web and continues to educate people like me about what makes soil healthy and productive. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure being here.
So we were just talking, and you were telling me about how you got interested in soil health and science, and it was primarily from your dad, your father.
Yeah. My father was a farmer in the Mesilla Valley, southern New Mexico, where the city of Las Cruces is located, and that's where I was raised. And he was always very passionate about taking care of the soil on his farm, and as well as always having a garden in our own yard where we raised a lot of our food. And so it was always interesting for me to hang out with my dad and watch him do things to the soil to try to make it a better soil. He was my inspiration.
That's terrific. Did he ever tell you how he got inspired?
Our family farmed the same land for 6 generations. So they've been farmers for a long time, and farmers are for the most part, they want to take care of their soil. Mm-hmm. And so it's just sort of a part of their genetics.
There's all this talk now about soil health, and there seems to be a much greater understanding in the past 20, 30 years about microbiology and living organisms in the living soil, things that make it strong and healthy and fertile. How did your dad come across this?
Well, he was a very intelligent guy and did a lot of reading on his own. He didn't have the opportunity to go to college because there were 2 wars that he had to be involved in. One was the Second World War, and then the Korean War, and that got in the way of his life as a young adult. But he was always interested in learning. So even when I was in college and in grad school studying chemistry, I was always fascinated to discover that if I went home to visit my parents and got involved in a conversation with my dad about something very complex like chemistry, he was able to jump right in and have that conversation with me. So he was self-taught. So he recognized early on that all the things that we were doing in farming was not the best way to treat soil, and told me so when I was 13 years old and wanting to compete in the state 4-H soil judging contest. And he was teaching me how to judge soil, which, by the way, I ended up winning the blue ribbon for the state. But while we were doing that, digging holes in the ground and filling the soil and determining the texture, the difference between sand, silt, clay, etc., he was holding some soil in his hand, and he said to me, Michael, everything we do in farming is wrong, and it destroys this. We need to do a better job at taking care of our soil. Now, that was in 1968, and I was 13 years old. That had a very profound effect on me, and so I've always tried my best to try to learn new ways of fixing the soil, and even in my freshman year in college, which was in 1974, I wrote a term paper for my soil science class with Dr. Boyce Williams at New Mexico State. The title of the paper was Soil Ecology and the Soil Food Web. And I described in that paper the trophic levels of life in the soil and how amino acids would flow from the smallest organism to the largest. In the process of them flowing from the smallest to the largest, some of those amino acids would be absorbed by the vegetation and would contribute part of the nitrogen budget of that plant. So what I described in 1974 is today recognized as accurate. Mm-hmm. And that concept of the soil food web is promoted and used by a lot of people. Now, I didn't get a very good grade on that paper.
What was the grade?
A BS. Yeah, the professor actually took out of his drawer a rubber stamp and inked it and stamped my paper BS. And said, "This is not science. Go back and write me another paper."
Interesting.
So, but in 1974, there was no such thing as the soil food web. I kind of just came up with the idea and got lucky. But it wasn't really what he wanted to see as far as a soil science class. He wanted to see more on stuff like base saturation of cations and pH and how pH is affecting this or that and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that was I was really kind of on the wrong page. I wasn't looking at it the way that the traditional soil person would be looking at soils at that time.
Right. And did that BS discourage you from further work? I mean, obviously it didn't forever. But...
Well, interesting enough, my I was only a freshman, so I like most freshmen, you're not exactly sure how you want to spend the rest of your life or what you really want to study. And Dr. Williams approached me one day and said, "Michael," he goes, "you need to change your degree." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, because you're too smart to be in this field. You're not taking advantage of your talents. I think you should probably be majoring in chemical engineering or maybe go into medicine or something like that, and you'll make a better living than you will as an agronomist or a horticulturist." And so anyway, I actually changed my field of study at that point and transferred to another university where I began studying human physiology and physical therapy. I was an athlete at the time, or at least I was trying to be an athlete. I competed in powerlifting, and I was a wrestler, and I ran marathons.
Terrific.
And so I was very curious about the science of the human body and how we work. In fact, behind me is a giant chart that shows all the metabolic pathways of the human body, and that's something that I had to memorize while in school. So it's very, very complex. It brought me full circle, from soils to complex integrated biochemistry and nutrition, and how does nutrition play a role in the functions of the human body, and back again to crops and soil, which are going to provide the nutrition in the first place. So It gave me a broader understanding of the whole system rather than just one focal point of a smaller system. So I think it made me a better scientist and better at what I do.
Mm-hmm. You didn't change your major back? You stayed in?
No, I stayed in the field of physiology and biochemistry.
Okay.
And it was in early 1980s, so actually about 1981, I owned a wellness company called Corpora Fit Systems, where we actually worked with industry helping to get their employees healthy and using a more holistic approach. So it combined the modalities of exercise, happiness, nutrition, all those things. And so part of the process of dealing with nutrition with in the employees of our clients was that we had to evaluate the diets of these clients. And we did that by designing a software program that could, you enter all the data of what this person was eating, and it would spit out a report and tell us whether or not they were getting adequate levels of vitamins and minerals and amino acids and the proper balance of all the essential amino acids, et cetera, et cetera. I became concerned that the data which we got from the USDA may not be entirely accurate. So I started sending food, fresh fruits and vegetables, to a certified food laboratory in Nebraska, asking them to analyze these items and give me a report back telling me what levels of the various vitamins and minerals that they contain.
And this is way before any data on this stuff was available in supermarkets and.
Yeah, well, the USDA had data on if you wanted to know how much vitamin C is in an orange or how much calcium is in an apple. Mm-hmm. There were documents that showed that, and that's what I used to build the software, the program that we use to analyze people's diets. So when I sent a lot of food off for analysis, and what I basically discovered is that even organically grown food, grown by organic certified farmers, were anywhere from 25 to 30% below what the USDA said they should contain in vitamins and minerals.
Was it higher than regular agricultural products? The organic ones?
A little bit, but not by much.
But our organic certification, when did that come into play?
It's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that. I'm not really sure when the Organic Food Act was actually passed by our Congress.
Okay.
But it was quite a long time ago.
Okay.
So there were organic growers at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I became concerned that our method of evaluating a diet wasn't a valid method because the data was wrong. Mm-hmm. And the data was wrong because the soils of agriculture, like my father said in 1968, had become compromised and no longer contained the microbiota, the microbes that are necessary in order for a plant to be able to uptake these minerals from the soil. And if the plant is unable to uptake a mineral from the soil, it's also going to be unsuccessful at building the vitamins within the system. And so that goes back to this metabolic chart here,
right, that
actually describes how our own body will build nutrition from the elements that we consume. Mm-hmm. So that's what integrated nutrition is. And so the failure begins at the soil. And when we fertilize crops with NPK fertilizers or acid-based fertilizers, then we disrupt the natural biogeology of the soil. It's been only recently that we have really begun to appreciate, what the biogeology is and how it works and who those microbes are specifically. We've been in cruder stages of the game in past decades where we used compost and compost teas and claimed that they were contributing beneficial microbes, but we really hadn't defined exactly what a beneficial microbe is. Who are they?
Right.
We hadn't done the metagenomics on it, and now we have. And so I have complete metagenomic studies that I did with Los Alamos National Labs, where we know exactly who the bacteria are, or the fungi, like mycorrhizal fungi, that we want to contribute to a soil site in order to rehabilitate that site.
Okay, we'll get to that. I want to get back to your, what was it called, CorporFit?
CorporFit was the name of the wellness company.
Okay, so you get the data back from the USDA,
yeah.
And they don't make a comment, I'm assuming, on the.
No, we didn't get it back from the USDA. We got it back from the soil, from the.
Oh, right. Yep.
And we were using USDA data to build the fields in the software program that was called Nutrifit, which was my program that I designed and built. If somebody ate an orange, for example, and they told me that they ate an orange on their report they gave me, we plugged that in, then it would tell us that they consumed X amount of fiber or essential fatty acids or vitamin C. What we discovered was that the fields that we built this software based on were not accurate, because the food no longer contained that level of nutrition.
Right.
I decided to make a career change.
That's interesting.
And I realized that if I was really going to have any significant impact in my life, I needed to go after the bigger problem. The bigger problem was soil, and not the individual working for a corporation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're thinking about an individual employee, that person's diet, they may be eating, pretty well, but they're not getting enough nutrition. Yeah, and it's not necessarily their fault that they're not getting enough, because they're trying.
Every best effort to be consuming a healthy diet, but the reality is they're not. And I heard a conversation on the radio a couple of years ago during the peak of the COVID pandemic. A medical doctor in Albuquerque, who is regularly on this radio station, was asked the question by a call-in if they should be supplementing extra vitamin D and zinc and C in order to help their immune system fight off or prevent the infection of this COVID virus? And his response was no, that as long as they ate a reasonable diet, they were getting everything they needed. Well, he's 100% wrong.
Yeah.
Because a reasonable diet doesn't exist anymore. You know, if you were following the food pyramid and eating that reasonable diet, you're going to be 25 to 30% based on 1981 food analysis work I did. What was it in 2020?
Right.
Probably a lot worse.
Yeah.
So we need to fix the soil.
We need to fix the soil.
Better nutrition, better immunity, ability to fight off infectious diseases. We have to fix our soil.
Yeah, it's interesting you're making the comparisons between our metabolic pathways and the plants that we put in the ground and their metabolic pathways. My friend John Rasick says we don't irrigate the plants or the crop, we irrigate the soil. And what you're saying is we're not feeding the plants fertilizer and whatnot, we're feeding the soil what it needs, or we should be.
Well, once we depleted the microbiology out of the soil, then we were irrigating and growing our crops hydroponically in the soil. If the crop is not able to solution from the soil the element that it needs, for example, iron. Iron, in Western soils, most Western soils that are being farmed have a high pH. And in high pH soils, iron gets tied up and is not easily solubilized into water by just water or the weak acids that a plant is making. And so the iron might be in that soil, but the plant is unable to drink it.
Right.
So in the world of biogeology, nature created a microbe a long time ago. I tell people, you know, we're dealing with the 300 million years of research and development. Nature created a microbe that is capable of making that iron available and soluble in water so the plant is able to drink it. But if that microbe is gone, if it's missing, then it's not going to happen.
Right.
If you flood irrigate a field and you have standing water in that field for any length of time, too long, then the soils are going to go anaerobic. And if they go anaerobic, then the aerobic bacteria, and that particular bacteria that helps us activate iron, is an aerobic bacteria. And so if your soils are underwater, then your aerobic bacteria are going to cease to exist. They're gone. And so for many decades, most of the agricultural soils of the western half of the United States are flood irrigated, and still are. You know, it's only recently that we have begun to convert over to drip irrigation, and we're doing that because, you know, we're in a water crisis. All the western states are in a water crisis. And so we're trying to make better use of our water by using drip instead of flood.
Mm-hmm. How long has that been going on, the drip?
I think probably the past 10 years we've seen slowly more and more farms start to convert over to drip.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to a couple things. Your use of the word solution is really interesting. And I understand it as you said also solubilize. And that's a really interesting concept related to geomicrobiology. So the microbes are eating whatever it is, rock, iron, whatever, and putting it into a form that can then, a solution that can then be eaten and uptaked by root system, mycorrhiza, and plants.
Yeah, I have images of rock that have tunnels drilled through the rock by mycorrhizal hyphae. And so the mycorrhizal hyphae are the tubes or the roots of the mycorrhiza that are going much further into the soil than what the roots of the host plant are able to reach. Now, they don't have to go just between the soil particles, you know, where the spaces are tight and the hair root of the plant is too big to be able to get through the space. They can actually drill their way through the soil, and in fact they can drill through rock. So any element that's in that rock that happens to be in the path of that mycorrhizal root is going to be solutioned into a liquid and delivered back to the plant that the mycorrhiza is being hosted by. The mycorrhiza has to have a plant. It can't live without a host plant.
Right.
If you let your ground go fallow for too long, and you're not putting in another crop, then the mycorrhiza that was attached to the first crop is going to have difficulty perpetuating itself without another crop to attach itself to. So it's important that we keep a crop growing all the time,
Right.
Summer and winter, so that the mycorrhiza always have a host plant.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way to determine the age of mycorrhiza? Or is it something that just continually dies and is reborn? And
Well, the individual hyphae of a mycorrhiza live, we think, somewhere around 6 to 7 days.
Okay.
And then they will die. The tissues of the hyphae contain a considerable amount of protein. Protein, of course, is made up of amino acids. So as that protein breaks down, once that hyphae dies and that protein breaks down, then either another mycorrhizal hyphae can come along and suck up those amino acids and give it to a plant, contributing to the nitrogen budget of that plant, or a microbe can come along and consume it.
Right. But mycorrhiza is not like a mycelium that can live on and on. It lives and dies. And
if you're walking through a forest and you see a fallen log, a tree is fallen over, and you see this white mycelium all over the wood, that is a white rot fungi. So that's a saprophytic fungi that is eating that wood.
Mm-hmm.
That's different than mycorrhiza.
Right.
Mycorrhiza is a fungus that has to have a plant to be connected to, because the plant is feeding the mycorrhiza what the mycorrhiza needs, which it can't make because mycorrhiza doesn't have chlorophyll, so it can't conduct photosynthesis. It's not phototropic. So it has to get its energy from somewhere. It's going to get it from the plant, and the plant's going to make protein, fats, and carbohydrates and feed it to the mycorrhiza.
Got it.
Mycorrhiza pays for this service by harvesting from the soil water and minerals and amino acids that it got by eating the carcass of a dead cockroach or a dead gopher, or a nematode egg. Mycorrhiza can eat nematode eggs.
Okay.
So if you have nematode problems in your field, get mycorrhiza established, and that will reduce your nematode problem considerably.
So the other question I had was, are there any anaerobic bacteria that are beneficial? Or is it mostly only aerobic bacteria that are beneficial?
No, there's certainly anaerobic bacteria who are beneficial as well.
Okay.
Just like in our own body. We have both aerobic and anaerobic, and we even have archaea in our body. Archaea are a precursor bacteria, I guess you could call them. They're a pre-bacteria, one-cell animal. Mm-hmm. And we used to think that archaea only existed in hot springs and in extremophile environments, but now we know that they are actually a major part of our biome.
Okay, so you're done with CorporFit. You've made a career move and choice, a life choice, to go back to studying soil. Did you just start more study, or did you start a company?
I started a tree farm, started growing trees, and I didn't know what kind of trees to grow, so I basically went to all the landscape architects in the community in Albuquerque and said,
okay,
hey, what kind of trees do you guys like to spec in your jobs? And they told me, and that's what I started growing. Later on, I became more interested in the native trees of the Southwest and began propagating them from seed, going out and doing my own seed collecting. And that's when I became interested in how can I grow a native tree that is connected to the microbiology beneath that native tree. So when I was collecting seed from the native trees across New Mexico, Arizona, and West Texas, I would also collect soil and microbiology samples from the soil and the roots of the parent trees that I was collecting the seed off of, and I would study it.
Mm-hmm. So Trees That Please started as basically a nursery for landscapers, and
started as a tree farm.
Okay.
And then I eventually began growing the trees in containers instead of growing them in the ground, and started manufacturing my own soil for doing that, which I still do to this day. Then we decided in 1995 to open a retail store. And so we began emphasizing the production of smaller trees that a homeowner could put into their car and take home. And so we started selling a 5-gallon size, 10-gallon, 15-gallon size trees instead of selling the great big caliper size trees that we were selling to contractors. Mm-hmm. We drifted to more smaller and smaller. But every tree that we grow at Trees That Please is inoculated using the same materials that we build at Soil Secrets. And so we're basically a biomimetic company. Mm-hmm. Biomimetic basically means we're using biomimicry or the inspiration of nature by observing how does nature work and then copy that.
And so Trees That Please, was that in Albuquerque or Las Lunas?
In Los Lunas.
Okay. When people come in and are buying them, not just contractors, but regular homeowners, are you evangelizing about what you know about soil and what's been growing in the pot?
Absolutely. We are a very unique retail nursery. We're probably the only retail nursery in New Mexico, at least, that you cannot buy a bag of fertilizer. And nor can you buy a herbicide. And if we sell a pesticide, it's going to be an organic one that is approved for use on an organic certified farm. So what do we sell them? Well, we sell them the tools that we know are going to build a healthy soil program. And so we sell them the mycorrhiza, we sell them the beneficial bacteria, we sell them the soil food in the form of a protein, and we sell them the carbon matrix, which is the recalcitrant carbon molecules of soil that I alone discovered and characterized with the help of the national labs in New Mexico, what we used to call humic acids. Humic acid has been sold in the world of agricultural fertilizers for a long time by many companies. The problem with it is, though, the actual molecule of a humic acid has never been described by any scientist of merit. And so if you go to the compendium database of chemistry, which is called the cash registry, and look up humic acid or fulvic acid, you will only find a theoretical model, stick and ball model of what they think humic acid is. But it hasn't actually been found and described. And so we claimed that humic acid was the miracle molecule, the miracle carbon molecule of soil that made soil what it is, or made soil function. However, nobody's ever measured it. So starting in 1998 and through 2011, I employed some people smarter than me and the National Nuclear Laboratories in New Mexico to help me do purification of the carbon substances of soil.
I just want to stop you there. Is that hard to do?
Very hard.
Employing the national lab to work on your project?
Yeah, they don't want to do it.
I want to do that. I want to do something like that.
They turned me down. The first time I asked them to do this for me, they turned me down and said basically, there's nothing interesting in soil. It's just dead stuff rotting away.
And this is in Los Alamos?
The original effort was done through Los Alamos, and my first application for research was done at Los Alamos, and they turned me down, and their reasoning was that we used the word humus and humic acid. So humic acid was the active ingredient in humus theoretically. And their response was, well, humus is nothing more than decaying organic matter. There's nothing there to study. They didn't want to do it. Well, we eventually convinced them to do it, and it turned into a pretty amazing research project. And I had the labs sign a contract with me, which basically gave me ownership of the research. and it's called a commercial proprietary information contract. So this falls under the intellectual property rights. And so we were able to actually find molecules in the soil that are carbon-based molecules that are extremely active. These molecules actually are massive induced magnetic fields. They make electricity. And it's the electrical magnetic field of these molecules that make them work, that give them the mechanism of action that contributes to building a soil. It's not a little tiny molecule. It's a very large molecule, and we have defined and described what its electrical dipole moment is. We're getting into quantum mechanics with this thing. It's pretty amazing.
That sounds amazing and way beyond my understanding. Did they look at your research when it was concluded, and did they have an opinion or their own analysis at the lab?
What the labs are basically doing is allowing us to use their machinery. For example, their high field nuclear magnetic resonance device, their mass spectrometers, etc. But we're the ones that are actually doing the data crunching and the final work on the information. So we created a statement of work that we give to them and say, this is what we want you to do. And then we create what the deliverables are that we want back from them. And so the deliverables that we want back from them are the data points. And then we take those data points and crunch them and turn it into real information that's useful to us.
Right.
So the information is totally owned by me. They have no opinion. They are not publishing this information. They don't have access to the total information to be able to publish it anyway. They are not endorsing. They're only providing a service of using some of their technical staff and their equipment to be able to do this kind of project.
Okay. And what is it? The National Resource Conservation Department?
Soil Conservation Service was renamed the Natural Resource and Conservation Service.
Right. And have you showed them your research?
I showed the soil scientists for the NRCS for the state of New Mexico and state of New Mexico's agronomists with the NRCS and numerous other people with the NRCS, but it's really over their head. They don't really have the level of education needed to be able to understand this kind of complexity, and they don't need to have it either. You know, their job is really more ground level kind of work. And that's the reason why they renamed it the Natural Resource and Conservation Service, because it was realized at some point in time that their work went beyond just soil conservation.
Interesting.
And so they renamed it the NRCS.
Okay. How about education in your state? University of New Mexico or New Mexico Tech? Has anybody there looked at what you've done?
We've done projects with New Mexico State University and Texas A&M in doing field trials with our materials to see if they could solve certain problems such as salinity issues, where the soils are accumulating too much salinity, inhibiting water uptake into the crop.
Is that due to fertilization? Yep.
Due to acidifying the soil. When you acidify an alkaline soil, trying to neutralize the alkalinity, it doesn't work. You know, it's simple chemistry. When one of the first things you learn in chemistry, in fact, if you take high school chemistry, is that
I did not.
When you add an acid to a base, you make a salt. You know, farmers were told for generations that they needed to neutralize the alkalinity of their soil because the alkalinity was the problem, inhibiting the use of phosphorus and iron and other elements that were getting tied up by the alkaline chemistry of the soil. So they tried to correct it by adding a strong acid like sulfuric acid to neutralize that alkalinity. It backfired on them because instead of it neutralizing the alkalinity, which you can't do, the buffering capacity of soil is immense. You don't have the budget to buy that much acid to change the pH of the soil. But what was happening was that the acids were reacting with the elements in the soil and they made salts. So the more you do that, the more salts you accumulate until eventually you have a problem. You can damage the soil to the point where the salt levels are so high that you can no longer farm that land.
Right.
You're done farming. One of the studies that I did with Los Alamos National Labs, after we had already done the molecular characterization, is that we took white alkali soil. That soil that basically has become so salty, it's what we call a saline sodic alkaline clay, that the soil is white. It looks like it snowed. Nothing will grow there. And we took that soil, we cooked it in an autoclave to make sure that if there were any bacteria in it, we killed them. We put the soil into trays, 1 square foot trays, 2 inches deep, 1 square foot surface area. We planted wheat seed in it, and then we put various increments of the carbon matrix molecules, or TerraPro, the brand name is TerraPro, from nothing up to very high, looking for what's the sweet spot that's enough to reverse the salinity and sodium of that soil.
And when you use the autoclave, that didn't affect the salts at all?
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. But we were just trying to make sure that there were no microbes influencing what was happening on the chemical level. We didn't want a biogeology process. We wanted just a geology process using these molecules of carbon. Mm-hmm. We found what the sweet spot was as to how much carbon is enough to fix this, that kind of a soil. But more interesting than that is when we harvested we wanted to weigh or measure how much total biomass each tray grew. So we excavated the plants out of the soil to weigh them and do a comparison, of all the different trays. And then we thought, what we should be doing is actually a forensics on the roots to see if there's any microbiology on those roots. And so we did that. And that's when we did what we call a metagenomics. And we harvested all the bacteria that we found, and it was a considerable amount of bacteria that was growing on those roots.
Okay, so it was clean soil sample with salt. And you added your TerraPro, and that's it?
That's it. And seed.
And seed. So where did the microbes come from?
We don't know. Because we grew these trays in growth chambers, which were clean room chambers that microbes could not find their way into.
Right.
And so we don't know. The TerraPro was also cooked in the autoclave. And the seed was washed with hydrogen peroxide. So any bacteria that was on the seed coat was also killed. Now, there's no way to kill the seed or the bacteria that are inside the seed.
Yeah.
That could be where they came from.
Okay.
But
interesting.
We ended up with a really massive list of the number of bacteria that we gene sequenced. And, that we did what we call a metagenomics.
Do you have any sense of how many different species of microbe were in there?
Hundreds. Yeah.
Were there differences like fungi or
no fungi?
So just bacteria?
Just bacteria.
Okay. Interesting. Man.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder immediately. I'm thinking of moon missions or sending robots to Mars. There's probably microbes on Mars from Earth at this point, right? They're absolutely everywhere. They're in the air.
It could be. I don't know. But it does give us some ideas of where we could potentially terraform soils or the dirt. There's no soil on Mars. There's only dirt.
Yeah.
Regolith. Remember the movie The Martian, where Matt Damon was trapped on Mars for an extended period of time? And he began growing. He went out and collected dirt and put it inside his living quarters and on the floor. And then he added freeze-dried human poop that they had been accumulating, and he added it as a source of fertilizer, and was successful in growing potatoes. That probably wouldn't work because you would not have the species diversity of microbiology coming from either the Martian dirt or the human freeze-dried poop. So it probably would not work. But what we were able to demonstrate is that there is a way to do that. We probably could terraform Martian dirt using what we are doing at Soil Secrets.
So that begs the next question. How do you get in touch with Elon Musk to... Yeah, I actually listened to him recently in a podcast where he was talking about... someone asked him about terraforming the moon and Mars. And he said, we're just focused on making rockets right now. We're just trying to accomplish the goal of getting there. They don't have a terraforming program right now, but they will need to.
Well, in order for us to eventually be able to successfully colonize Mars, it won't work if we can't make the colony sustainable on its own.
Right.
And Elon Musk even said that himself, that if we were going to be depending on spaceships flying, supply ships from Earth flying to Mars to bring supplies, everything that they need to survive on Mars, that we are not going to be successful at living on Mars, that we have to generate everything we need from what's there on Mars.
Absolutely.
And not depending on what's coming from the Earth. So we will have to grow food on Mars, and we will have to be able to find a way to recycle the water and or even find sources of water that are indigenous to Mars. Mm-hmm. It would be really fun to be able to get a hold of some Martian soil. I own a biolab at the Trees That Please Nursery that we can do those type of proof of concept research projects.
There was a story very recently, I think in June or July, from NASA, where they finally took some regolith from the moon and sprouted some seedlings in it. I read the article. I didn't read a paper or anything on it, but it sounded kind of simple because you can sprout a seed in a plastic bag. I don't think you necessarily need healthy living soil just to sprout a seed, but they claimed it was a breakthrough that we could grow seedlings on the moon. But I don't think the plants, it's just rock. I don't think the plants did well after the germination phase.
I don't know. I was in my early days of a college student. I actually worked for NASA on a co-op position. It's one of those jobs that to help college kids get job experience, and so they're more employable later on. And now this was well after the Apollo program had gone back and forth several times, and they brought back moon rocks and soil from the moon. And I had heard at that time that they attempted to grow plants in the debris brought back from, I hesitate to call it soil because it's not soil,
right?
The moon dust, and that it failed, that the plants would not grow in it. Now, I've never taken the time to research the Science Citation Index to see is there actually published research on that sort of thing. It'd be probably a good thing to look for that.
Interesting. So you have Trees That Please, and you're producing. If you were to make a guess, how many trees have you propagated in your time?
Gosh, many tens of thousands. I have in the nursery at any given time tens of thousands of trees, and so we've been doing this for 38 years. So a lot.
Well, I'd like to personally thank you for making all those trees. It's terrific. When did you start Soil Secrets?
It started off really the original intention of it was to make I'll use this term loosely, fertilizer that I needed to grow my trees. I wasn't really prepared to sell it to anybody at that point in time. So back in about 1983, 84, in 1985, I picked up my pace on it because I bought some land in Los Lunas that I wanted to live on with my wife, and the land was terrible soil. It was white alkali soil. It was a saline, sodic, alkaline clay. So the first 100 trees or so that my wife and I planted on the site died.
So when you bought the place, did you see the soil and did it raise red flags?
No, because I bought the land in the summer.
Oh.
And white alkali doesn't look like white alkali in the summer.
Interesting. What's it look
Not,
like?
not till winter time that it turns white.
Oh, this
So
is very odd.
well, it's just because of the way the salts will precipitate out on the surface,
Hmm.
and then you can see it. But in the summertime, you don't see it because we're getting summer monsoon rains, and New Mexico gets summer rain,
Hmm.
and the rains will push it down into the soil profile, and you don't see it.
Oh, interesting.
So
And that cycle happens every single year?
every year,
Wow.
yeah. So once I realized how nasty the soil was, first of all, it was a clay, a horrible shrink swell clay with big giant cracks in it, and it would get dry. And so anyway, once I realized that I'd bought some pretty crummy land, I had a soil analysis done on it. And funny thing is that I sent that analysis report to my freshman college soil science professor, Dr. Boyce Williams, the same guy that gave me the BS grade on my paper. And I sent him the analysis and I said, "What do you think about this soil?" And he said, "Michael, you can't fix that kind of soil. I recommend you put a for sale sign on that property and go somewhere else." Well, today I have a arboretum of trees from all over the world growing on that site. I have redwood trees that are around 70 feet tall. I have oak trees that I put the seed in the ground in 1998 that are over 50 feet tall.
Wow.
I have 47 different species of oak alone on that site.
Incredible. How big is the site?
It was originally about 3 acres, and I recently sold one parcel to my daughter who got married, and so we've broken it up. I'm still doing experiments on 1 acre of it that's in pasture that we're basically doing testing of the soils, of the microbiology of the soil, and it was particularly bad soil on that part of the property. So I'm still doing testing on that. But the rest of the property is a forest of trees. I have giant timber bamboo, an orchard of many different kinds of fruit trees, and sugar maples, and it's literally a forest. It's really quite beautiful. And
So,
that's on soil that had formerly been high pH, saline sodic alkaline clay.
how long did it take you to rehabilitate the soil?
Well, it was a slow process to begin with because I didn't have the knowledge of the carbon matrix in those early days. I was trying to use humic acid products that I would buy, from commercial sources. So I would say that we began the project in 1985, and I would say that almost everything we planted between 85 and 88 eventually died. And then by 89, 90, we began having success in keeping trees alive and keeping vegetable gardens alive. And we began to see that we were on the right path, and the soils were getting better and better and better. So
Amazing.
once I figured out how to make the carbon matrix, I've actually rehabilitated toxic mine tailings with the carbon matrix in one application where it's gone from not capable of germinating and growing anything, not even a weed, to being able to grow grasses and shrubs and trees with just one application.
And this is on you said a mine tailing? What's that?
Mine tailings are the spoils after they have extracted the precious, whatever it is, lead, copper, whatever, from the ore. Mm-hmm. The tailings are the crushed, pulverized, powdered ore that has been extracted. Mm-hmm. And these are generally very toxic because they use harsh chemical extraction to get the metals out of the ore.
And a healthy soil over time will reduce the toxicity, correct?
By putting the carbon matrix on those tailings, we can almost instantly change the chemistry of those tailings and make them capable of growing vegetation. Almost instantly. And we've done this numerous times with the mining operations that are responsible for doing mine reclamation. These are companies that have tried biochar, compost teas, compost, manure, biodynamics, and all of them failed. None of them were able to fix that kind of a situation.
So would those things in tandem with carbon matrix, would that be beneficial, adding?
Probably not. Don't need them. I can fix the soil with a carbon matrix, add a cocktail of beneficial bacteria. The carbon matrix even has a very wide species diversity of bacteria, and we're not even sure how that happens. But we've taken our carbon matrix and liquefied it and put it under a microscope, and it's teeming with microbes.
Interesting.
You know, you add the carbon matrix, which basically buffers the chemistry, making the chemistry compatible with vegetation, fixing any problem with that, whether it be salinity or sodium or pH or whatever. It opens up the structure so the soil can breathe, improving porosity. And then you add a cocktail of other microbes and a food for the microbes, because they need to be able to eat. Until vegetation is established, they need to be able to eat.
And that's your protein crumblies?
That's the protein crumblies.
Okay, so if you didn't do protein crumblies, I mean, they would eat whatever's in the compost or organic matter?
Compost is not a good source of protein.
Okay.
And we need protein because the building blocks of life are amino acids.
Mm-hmm.
And you only get amino acids from protein.
Okay.
Compost is a fertilizer. It has a fertilizer value, but it's not a particularly good source of protein. Okay. So, I mean, you can do other sources of protein, like you could take dried fish and grind them up into a powder and spread that out, or you could take beans, pinto beans, or any kind of a bean, soybean, and grind it up into a powder and apply that. That's a source of protein.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But our protein works quite well for that purpose.
And I won't ask you what it is, because I'm sure it's a trade secret.
It changes. It changes because protein is a commodity, and you have to shop commodity based on what the prices are on commodities. So as long as it has the characteristics that we want, you know, the protein value, the NPK value, etc., then it's going to work.
Gotcha. So I've been to Albuquerque a number of times. I haven't been to Las Lunas, but I've seen it on the map on Google Earth. It's pretty dry. Your place is like a little oasis. Surely people have noticed it.
Well, we have two places. We have the Arboretum, where there is a nursery, where there's probably, I couldn't even guess accurately how many trees are in that nursery, but tens of thousands are in that nursery, and they're growing under a canopy of large oak trees and redwood trees and all kinds of stuff. So you can see it from Google Earth that it's a forest growing in the desert. So that's the Arboretum site. And 4 miles down the road is the nursery, the Trees That Please nursery. That covers about almost 6 acres in size. And not only is that a retail store, but there's also an arboretum being developed there. We have many hundreds of trees already planted on that site, including some redwoods that are already up to about 70 feet tall. I bought that land in 1995. The redwoods were started from seed in 1999 and 2000, and they're up about 70 feet tall now.
I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, and we have oak trees on that site that are probably 60 feet tall that are 25 years old from seed.
Wow.
And then I have an apple orchard with 185 different kinds of apple trees.
Wow.
In the orchard. And so it's an oasis also.
So I guess what I'm getting at, are people not questioning what you're doing, or they just assume you're using tons of water to feed all of these trees?
Well, I mean, we are a very successful business that's been in business longer than, under the same ownership, longer than any other retail nursery in the Albuquerque metropolitan area. So we're well known. And we get a lot of people that will come to my nursery just to see it. Mm-hmm. In fact, this coming Well, at the end of August, on August 27th, we will have visitors from all over the world coming to my nursery to see it. They're members of the International Oak Society, where we're going to put on a tour for them of the notable oak woodland areas of New Mexico and conclude the tour after 4 days. It will finish up in Las Cruces, where we will then have the International Oak Society conference in
Terrific.
Las Cruces. And so, but many of these attendees, there'll be hundreds of them, will want to come up and visit my arboretum and my nursery to see what we're doing there. I've had the San Francisco Bay Horticulture Society show up in a big chartered bus, and 80 people pile out of that bus and with wine and bread, and
Of course, of course.
tour my arboretum, and then we open up the wine and have a little wine and bread together.
Terrific.
And so it's well visited, it's well known what we have there.
What I'm getting at is the people that live around you. Do they think you're some sort of tree wizard, or do they just assume you're using too much water?
Well, we're in an agricultural valley, so people irrigate their crops.
Okay.
There's irrigated alfalfa fields all around us, and so they don't really notice us that much. They do notice my lawn. I have a lawn at the retail nursery that covers about a half acre, and it's a very beautiful green lawn. And they ask me, how do you get it that way? You know, we don't ever see lawns that nice in New Mexico. And I say, well, interesting enough, I planted that lawn in 2016 using my molecular biology, microbes and carbon matrix and protein. And I haven't touched it since. The only thing I do to it is water it and mow it. I've been given additional protein or fertilizer of any kind since 2016.
Really?
That's right.
So if you were to do a soil sample of it, even just the topsoil, would you still find protein remnants from 2016?
No, that protein has been used up by the microbes. But what you will find is a very healthy and abundant population of mycorrhiza and bacteria and earthworms and other levels of the soil food web living in that soil. One of the in our elixir or on our cocktail of bacteria that we provide farmers, it's called a consortium biopack. I have 6 different species of free living nitrogen fixing bacteria. So these are bacteria that don't need a plant to be able to do what they do. They're capable of harvesting nitrogen out of the atmosphere and turning it into a form of nitrogen that a plant can use. So they're called free living nitrogen fixing bacteria. So my soils are going to be rich in these type of bacteria. So this is why I don't have to add nitrogen fertilizer ever again.
Got you. Because it's created a circle of life that is constantly renewing itself.
It's a sustainable ecosystem.
Wonderful. So you have a customer or somebody, a visitor, asking you how you do it, and you evangelize what you're up to. What is the reception? Are people flabbergasted? Do they generally understand what you're up to? Think about it differently? Yeah. How do they receive it?
All the above. We have a lot of repeat customers. We ship our product all over the United States and into Mexico. Every new acre of pecan orchard installation in Mexico is treated with our stuff. And Mexico now has more acreage of pecan groves than New Mexico. And New Mexico is the largest pecan producing state in the United States. We have people calling us or emailing us or ordering it off of our website, and we ship it to them. We're going to plant 5,000 square miles of trees in Saudi Arabia.
Really?
Over a 5-year period, 5,000 square miles. And they want soil secrets to be used in the soil to jumpstart the biogeology of those desert soils.
What kind of trees?
They're desert trees dated to Saudi Arabia. I won't be involved with the production of the trees because we can't grow trees in New Mexico and ship them to Saudi.
Sure. That's incredible. Have you done other international projects?
We've been used in mine reclamation in Peru. I've had products sent into the Middle East before. One other international project, which was a 7,000 acre wine growing ranch in Baja, Mexico, and about an hour south of Ensenada, Mexico, where they were dealing with water issues because water has to be pumped there. They don't have surface water, and the water quality was poor quality because it was high in salts. So the higher the water is in salts, the more water you have to use because salt wants to fight with the plant, for that water. And this is the same problem you have if you're stuck out on a lifeboat in the ocean. You've heard the old expression, water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink.
Right.
Because the water has too much salt in it, then the salts are going to pull water out of your body instead of letting you benefit from the water that you're drinking. So in the case of this particular wine operation, they were needing to irrigate a considerable amount in order to keep the vines from dehydrating. We put down 1,000 pounds of our carbon matrix TerraPro per mile row of grapes, or per mile of drip line. Basically, it's a band of carbon about 4 inches wide and about 1/8 of an inch thick.
And do you put it under the soil, or do you just put it right on top?
Right on the surface.
Interesting.
And right beneath where the drip irrigation line is dribbling water on the ground. So what happened to the irrigation demand on that crop was amazing, in that the crop went from needing to be irrigated once every 5 days to needing irrigation only once every 21 days.
Wow.
The engineers that manage and run that operation gave me a report about a year later showing that the yield on the grapes that were treated this way increased by 59%. And the quality of the grapes increased by about 10%.
Wow.
Of the 9 different varieties of wine grapes that they were growing. So not only did they see a huge change in the how much water was needed to grow this crop, but the quality of the crop improved and the yield of the crop improved a lot.
Amazing. Just real quick, how do they determine how much less water they need to start doing?
They have moisture sensors in the ground.
Okay.
And the moisture sensors basically are communicating with a master brain computer at the offices, and they are also looking at the temperatures of the leaves.
Oh, interesting.
And so if the plant begins to get too dry and it can't uptake water enough to maintain photosynthesis, then the stomata on the leaves will close. So to minimize the loss of metabolic water, because when the plant is conducting photosynthesis, it's going to be losing water. Mm-hmm. So, but as it's losing water, the evaporative cooling effect on the leaf is significant, and the leaf will be much cooler than the air temperature is. So in the Southwest, in Albuquerque, Los Lunas, Las Cruces, El Paso, we actually cool our houses using an evaporative swamp cooler, and it works on the same principle.
Gotcha.
Or a wet wall in a greenhouse. You've seen those, I imagine.
I have not.
Okay, well, that works on the same principle. A wet wall is just a great big wall with water dribbling through it, and then you suck air through it using fans, and as the air comes through that wet wall, it cools it down a lot. Mm-hmm. So if the leaf is evaporating off water, it's going to cool off the leaf.
It's respiration, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so they put these devices on the vines. It's kind of like when, during COVID, you probably walked into a building somewhere where somebody pointed a little gun at your forehead to check your temperature to see if they're going to let you into that building or not, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And we can do the same thing on a plant with the same kind of a
interesting.
gun.
Okay.
Pointed at a leaf, and if that leaf is getting adequate water out of the soil and able to continue photosynthesis, it's going to be cool. If you point it to another plant that the soil is dry, it's going to be hot. So they use that technology to be able to determine when the irrigation system needs to turn on.
Right.
So that's how they know if the crop needs to be irrigated or not.
Gotcha. So they have to use less water. They have more nutrition in the crop, and they have more crop to harvest.
There's more nutrition because the only way nutrition can get into a plant is with water. And so if your soils are holding their moisture better,
Right.
then there's water available to transport the mineral elements into the plant.
And this is all from one application, a big one, but it was one application at the start of the project. And
yeah, it's not even a very big one. Putting 1,000 pounds down per mile.
Yeah, right.
Row of grapes is about equal to 600 pounds per acre. That's not very big.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. So is everyone that has a vineyard knocking on your door?
We've had quite a few vineyards that have knocked on our door. We've had a lot of cotton farmers knock on our door because we've done the same thing on cotton and shown the same thing.
Interesting.
That it improves the drought tolerable limits of the crop. So, and we've done it on city parks.
So, okay, well, let me get back to that. I had another question about different crops needing different soil qualities, but your product, carbon matrix and protein crumblies, they can benefit any type of soil for any type of crop, in your opinion?
Yeah, there's different. If you're growing broccoli, broccoli is a brassica. Brassicas do not associate with mycorrhiza.
Oh, really?
Yeah, none of your brassicas do. So if you're growing rapeseed for canola oil production, don't waste your time putting a mycorrhiza on the seed. It's not going to work. If you're planting tillage radishes are used to break up heavy clays and to grow organic matter in the soil. Don't bother putting mycorrhiza on the seed because it's not going to work. Your brassicas are natural biocides. They create chemicals that will kill mycorrhiza. If you've grown a brassica crop like canola oil rapeseed, and then you want to grow another kind of crop like soybeans or corn, you will need to inoculate the seed with mycorrhiza because the mycorrhiza that used to be there was wiped out by the brassica.
Interesting.
And so were many of the bacteria. So you probably should. It would be prudent for you to inoculate with bacteria also.
Interesting.
So there is some differences that you would do with different kinds of crops. Mm-hmm. We do look at that.
Okay. We talked, when we first talked, you told me about some projects you did on a road construction, a highway construction in Nevada.
Yeah.
You were adding the same product to basically an earthwork along a stretch of highway.
Yeah, similar. I mean, the TerraPro carbon matrix, the protein crumblies, the bacteria, the mycorrhiza were all put together into a hydro-seeding machine along with a seed and a wood fiber mulch, and was all shot out as a one-step application. So there is about 90 miles of highway going up to Hoover Dam.
Okay.
That was treated that way from Kingston going up to Hoover Dam.
Okay. Were you on the site when they did it?
Went out there quite a bit.
Okay.
And I had to show the contractor how to do it.
And what's it look like now?
It looks good. I mean, there's lots of native vegetation growing along that highway.
Terrific.
And we've done that also with other states where they had a protocol of using compost and straw to try to accelerate the development of the soil. We went in and did an experiment with the permission of the State Department of Transportation and used the same technique that we did in Nevada and compared it to the traditional way with compost and straw. And we always do better. I mean, the vegetation, the establishment of perennial grasses is considerably better than what compost can do.
And they don't water that stretch of highway at all.
In the Southwest, Western states, not irrigated.
Right.
Right.
But it rains in the summer.
Some places.
Some places, yeah. Maybe not out by Hoover Dam.
Right, not out by Hoover Dam.
Yeah. Let's talk about compost. Because when I talked to you originally, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm a layman. I've seen some experiments putting raw organic matter, or mostly raw organic matter, into the ground, compost, all kinds of things, and have seen soil been repaired in those circumstances. But when I talk to you, you have a different idea, and you see compost, you see some problems with compost, or too much compost because of the nitrogen elements. And
it's a common mistake made where a lot of compost is specified into the project. And recently we had a consultant who was advising a cannabis grower in New Mexico on how to build healthy soil, and they were advising that the cannabis grower put 6 inches of compost down on the soil and till it in. So the cannabis grower knew about us. They visited my facility, so they contacted us and said, "What do you think? Can we buy compost from you?" First of all, they wanted to be able to buy compost, and they wanted to know what my opinion was of using that much compost. And I said, well, you have to treat compost as a fertilizer, and any good compost manufacturer is going to have an analysis of their compost. So if they are following the guidelines of the U.S. Composting Council and starting off with a proper carbon to nitrogen ratio to make the compost do what it's supposed to do, by default, you're going to end up with a nitrogen level somewhere between 1.5 and 2%. So that means that for every 1,000 pounds of compost, you're going to have about 20 pounds of nitrogen. So let's do a little bit of math. Let's say we're going to put 6 inches of compost down on 1 acre of land. That's an acre of land is 43,560 square feet. So if you put down 6 inches, then you put half a cubic foot down on every square foot, right? So 43,560 square feet divided by 2 is going to be 21,780 cubic feet of compost. A yard of compost is 27 cubic feet. A yard of compost is going to weigh about 1,000 pounds. If I divide 21,000 cubic feet by 27, then I know that I'm going to need 806 yards of compost to cover that acre of land 6 inches deep. And if a yard of compost weighs 1,000 pounds, then I have put down 806,000 pounds of compost on an acre of land. If it's 2% nitrogen, then I put down 16,000 pounds of nitrogen on that acre of land. Now you tell me what crop you're aware of that can handle 16,000 or needs 16,000 pounds of nitrogen. None. You know, the most nitrogen hungry crop that is grown in North America is corn. Corn growers, their magic number of how many bushels of corn they want to be able to brag about that they're able to grow is 300 bushels. And so they say that to get a bushel of corn, you got to have a unit of nitrogen. That means to grow 300 bushels of corn per acre, you have to use 300 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Not 16,000 pounds. You know, 16,000 pounds would be 54 times more nitrogen than what that corn crop needs.
Right.
90% of that 300 pounds of nitrogen you put on that corn, at least 90% of it never gets used by the corn. It leaches down into the groundwater and contaminates the groundwater.
The chemical application of nitrogen.
Even an organic application. Even if you put down my protein crumblies at that level, it's going to leach into the ground because nobody can use that much nitrogen. What would really happen if you put down that much nitrogen and that much all the other fertilizers that are found in compost, you have to think of compost as a fertilizer. That's what it is. It may be in organic form, but it is a fertilizer. And so when you put that kind of heavy load of all those nutrients into the ground, you're going to chicken fry that ground. And it's not going to be able to grow much. It'll grow weeds, and that's about it.
Interesting.
It's a common mistake that people overuse compost. How much compost should they have really put down? About 1/4 inch. If you put down 1/4 inch of a good quality compost, then you're going to get a nice healthy level of NPK nutrients as well as other micronutrients. That's what compost is. It's a fertilizer.
Interesting.
It is not a soil builder.
And so what did the cannabis farmer say to you when you told him that?
Well, they called it the consultant in California, who was a genius, of course,
Yeah.
and knows everything that you need to know about growing cannabis. And they put him on the phone with me, and I walked him through the same math that I just did for you, and he didn't understand it.
I don't either, by the way, but I trust you.
He didn't understand it.
No, I mean, I understand the basics of it. It makes sense.
He just said, I disagree with you. I think that much compost is going to be good enough. That's going to work. And I said, well, okay, I have done my duty in
Right. Yep.
educating you. So now you can go ahead and try to grow cannabis and see if it works. And I hope you don't fail. I don't like to see people fail.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I would make the assumption too that a chemical application of nitrogen would leach much faster into the groundwater than compost.
No, not really, because as nitrogen goes through the nitrogen cycle in soil, it ultimately ends up as a nitrate. Now, it doesn't matter if that nitrogen came from a bean, from fish powder, from fish emulsion, or from a bag of fertilizer. It's going to turn into a nitrate. Now, nitrate is an anion, not a cation. A cation has a positive charge, which means it can adhere to the magnetic attraction of the negative charge of the soil particle. So they're going to be attracted to each other. Soil particle has a negative charge. That's what we call the electrical negativity factor, or cation exchange capacity.
More stuff I don't understand. It's
your nitrate, being an anion, has a negative charge, and your soil particle has a negative charge. So if you've ever played with magnets, then you know if you face negative to negative, they repel each other. You got to turn it around so you have positive facing negative in order for it to stick, right?
Sure.
Okay, so a nitrate has a negative charge and your soil particle has a negative charge, so they're going to push it apart. And that means that the only place that nitrate can go is down. Water's going to carry it down and out of the soil and into your groundwater, because there's nothing in your soil to grab it and hold it. And then it doesn't matter where that nitrate came from. What was the source? Was it compost? Was it a bean? Was it Michael's protein crumblies? It makes no difference. If you put protein down as a protein, it has to be first eaten by a microbe before that protein becomes available as an amino acid.
Right.
Because the microbe is going to eat it and make protein. It's going to make more microbes. And the body of the microbe is going to contain protein. And when that microbe dies, or gets consumed by a bigger microbe, then the proteins that were within its body, just like when you eat a steak, the protein that's part of that steak is digested by the protease enzymes in your digestive system, ripped apart and freeing the amino acids so that your body can now rebuild something with those amino acids. So
you're making me hungry.
Yeah. So in soils, if a little bacteria gets eaten by a big protozoa, then the protein that was in that bacteria becomes amino acids that are available for that protozoa to build its body. Mm-hmm. And then along comes an earthworm who eats the protozoa.
Right.
Same thing happens again.
Yeah.
And so you're delaying the inevitable of that nitrogen that is part of the molecule of the amino acid. Within the molecule of an amino acid is a nitrogen element. And so that's why when that amino acid finally makes its way into a plant, the plant is getting a nitrogen benefit from the amino acid. So we're basically bypassing the or eliminating or reducing the potential loss of nitrogen going into the groundwater because it turned into a nitrate.
Right. Okay, so I want to get your opinion on something that is my primary concern, which is not just carbon sequestration, but soil health in general. Even as a little kid, I would look at a desert, and clearly there's some deserts that are obviously gorgeous, your neck of the woods in particular, but there's a problem of desertification. Deserts are spreading around the world. Soils are being degraded by human use or misuse. In your opinion, what are some of the best ways to recover some of these soils, not just in agriculture, but in general ecological restoration efforts around the world?
Nature is remarkably resilient, is really quite magnificent. I was walking every day. Or at least 3 or 4 times a week, I will climb a volcano that is across the street from my nursery. It's called Tomei Hill. It's a 1-hour walk from the nursery to the top of the hill and back down again. And so it's like climbing a 50-story office building or stair climbing, to get to the top of this thing.
Terrific.
And so we had some light rains last week, not very much, maybe about a 1/4 inch of rain. And as I was climbing up Tomei Hill, I noticed that there was a greenish tint to the soil. And so I stopped to take a look at it a little bit closer, took some photographs of it. And what it was basically blue-green algae growing on the soil from that little bit of rain. Mm-hmm. So the blue-green algae or cyanobacteria are a nitrogen-fixing phototropic bacteria or algae that they're algae and bacteria that live together. And it's basically what we call a cryptobiotic crust. Mm-hmm. That sometimes you can't see it, but it's there.
Right.
And it's nature's way of beginning the formation of soil. So I was able to see it because it had rained, and the bacteria and the cyanobacteria and the algae were blooming and growing vigorously to take advantage of the little bit of moisture that we had.
Right.
And so this happens all over the world. If you go to Arches National Park in Utah, they warn you to stay on the trail. Don't walk on the cryptobiotic soil crust because you'll damage it.
Right.
It's nature's way of beginning what we call the biogeology process of building soil and sequestering carbon into the soil. Now we can accelerate it. We can speed it up.
How do we do that?
By adding those microbes. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. And by adding something to the soil to help retain moisture, because one of the problems with deserts is that it may rain, but it's arid, and with low humidity, and moisture doesn't stay in that soil very long, particularly if the soils get hot. If you were to measure the temperatures of the soil in my Arboretum and compare it to soils anywhere else in my county, any one of the pastures, alfalfa fields, pecan orchards, wherever, you will discover that the soils in my Arboretum are about 16 degrees cooler than anywhere else. That means that they're not going to evaporate water as quickly because cool soils don't lose water as fast as hot soils. So if you wanted to try to accelerate the pedogenesis of a desert soil, the term pedogenesis means soil creation, then you could do it by priming the soil with those biogeology microbes and adding the carbon matrix molecules, which will attract and hold water in the soil, keeping the soils cooler and more moist. Mm-hmm. And this then will give vegetation a chance to establish and flourish and sequester more carbon into the soil. Starts the whole process.
Have you done any projects where you just apply your products to just open desert and just leave it alone?
We have.
What's the result?
Well, I did it back in 1996 on 30 acres between Albuquerque and Santa Fe on land that had been owned by a canning company, Van Camp Canning. And they had done a permaculture project on that site first, and that failed. The permaculture did nothing to help hold moisture in the soil. And
so Van Camp initiated the permaculture project?
Yeah, they paid for it.
Okay. So they hired somebody local?
They hired the Drylands Permaculture Institute, I think is what they were called at the time.
Okay.
A lot of brute force was put into trying to manipulate that land to be able to hold on to moisture. Very expensive process. Then it failed, and I was approached and asked if they could experiment with my stuff, and we did it. And I have aerial photographs of the site where you can clearly see that there's a lot more vegetation growing on that 30 acres than there is outside of that 30 acres.
Without any watering, regular,
Water.
Nothing.
Oh, just natural rainfall. Yeah, that site gets an average of 9 inches of precipitation a year, but that particular year was a drought year, and they only got about 3 inches.
Interesting.
So the TerraPro carbon was put down in October of 96, and I took the photograph in June of 97 from an airplane. Now, the significance of that date is that our monsoon rains don't begin in that part of New Mexico until about the middle of July. So the ground was really, really, really dry, and it had been a bad year for winter snow.
Interesting.
But the carbon matrix still attracted enough moisture out of the air to get the native grasses to green up. And the way the carbon matrix does that is it's a natural humectant. A humectant means that it's something that will attract moisture. So the carbon matrix is made up of molecules that have a high electrical dipole moment or a electrical charge. So if you look at the molecule, it has a positive side and a negative side. And there's a current that goes through the molecule passing from the negative to the positive. That's called the dipole and the magnetic field. To understand what I'm saying, if you were to take a plastic water bottle, something like this, but not, you have to take that stupid wrapper off of there, and then you got a plastic water bottle, empty, a dry one. If you were to rub it on a stack of paper towels vigorously for several minutes, and while you're rubbing it, you turn on your water faucet to your kitchen sink to a slow stream. And rub, and then you hold that water bottle close to that stream of water. You'll see that water bend and go towards that bottle.
Right.
How? Because you built up a static charge in that bottle, a negative charge. And the positive side of the water molecule is going to turn and go towards the negative of the bottle.
Right.
So if I put something in the soil that has either a strong negative or a strong positive, then it's going to attract water and help you. And so if you have humidity in the air, if you put something in the soil that has a strong charge, it's going to pull moisture out of the air and into the soil.
Gotcha.
That's how it works. We can do the same thing, harvesting water out of the air by putting nets along the ocean. When the fogs come through these nets, if we put an electrical charge through the net, we can increase the water condensation on the net exponentially.
Interesting.
Versus the net without an electrical charge.
Yeah, I've seen these nets before, like in Patagonia.
Yeah.
And but I've never heard of the electrical charge. That's interesting.
It's only been done in a few places, and it works extremely well.
I'm going to look that up. That's fascinating.
So that's how I'm able to make a crop more drought tolerant, is by putting an electrical charge in the soil.
Gotcha.
Using carbon matrix. I cut this article out of the Albuquerque Journal. Well, it's backwards. You can't read it. But anyway,
no, I can read it.
With water scarce, it's about agriculture, basically saying that we're in trouble.
Yeah.
With water scarce, tomato products are under threat. And they're basically saying that in the state of California, which is a major producer of tomatoes, they're going to be in big trouble, unable to produce the tomatoes that our demand for tomatoes in the United States is represented by. So what's the solution to that? I am the solution. I can fix that problem.
So how do we get the word out? How do you let people know?
By doing what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And by using different platforms. I don't know how many people you have that watch your.
I just started this. No one's watching. I
Oh,
just started this show.
but by using what we call influencers
Yeah.
and social media.
Yeah. You sound correct. I trust you. The proof is in the pudding. I think everybody like you who has an incredible idea, incredible plan, incredible product, we should be throwing it at the wall and seeing if it sticks. I hope that you get all the success on these products, and it sounds like you figured it out.
Figure part of it out.
Yeah, how much more do you think is there to figure out?
I don't think anybody really knows, but in 2013 I was lecturing in Austria at the world's first humus experts meeting, where I represented North America as the expert on humus. And there's an audience of a few hundred professionals, agronomists, soil scientists, horticulturists. So somebody from Australia spoke, and somebody from Germany spoke, and then I got up to say do my song and dance. And the first thing I told the audience was that I'm not an expert. I have information that they don't have, and I'm going to share that information with them. But I'm not an expert. There are no experts on this topic because all of us are at the bottom of the learning curve.
Yeah.
And we have to be willing to learn and climb up that learning curve. And if you think you're an expert already and you're unwilling to learn, then you're dead wrong.
I'm going to move forward with the assumption that I'm not an expert in anything. But you've helped me out quite a lot with this concept, and it's enlightening.
Well, there are no experts. And, so when I do a lot of lecturing. I've spoken all over the country. I've spoken at many Acres USA conferences. Spoke in France in 2011 at a couple of conferences, and in Mexico with groups of farmers, and I always tell them we have a lot to learn.
Yeah. What's the reception you get normally?
Always good.
Always good. Great.
Always good. Yep.
I'm sure you've heard the UN's report that because our agricultural practices have degraded soil so much that we only have approximately 60 harvests left. What's your analysis of that?
If you look at what the U.S. government Soil Conservation Service has reported on how much agricultural land has been lost in the United States since the day I was born in 1955, it's about 60 million acres.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the state of California
are you talking about soil erosion?
Total degradation.
Mm-hmm.
Land that will no longer farm.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason. And so the state of California, which is our single largest agricultural state, has 26 million acres of farmland. So we have lost double of what California has in my lifetime. I think that's pretty serious. And in 2016, I've been told by somebody who should be in the know, who had been on faculty at University of Cal Davis as the vice president of the College of Agriculture, that in 2016, over 1 million acres of farmland in the Bakersfield, California region was shut down, no longer farmable because it had become too salty. 1 million acres. There are states in the United States that don't have 1 million acres of total farmland.
Right.
New Mexico and Arizona are two states that we don't have 1 million acres of agriculture. And yet they shut that much down in 1 year in California. So is that statistic accurate that the United Nations is, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's a problem.
In the mid 80s, you saw that nutrients in just regular foods was way below what it was supposed to be, and that problem has only gotten worse.
Early 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's only gotten worse. We know it's gotten worse, and we know we're losing farmland. Sometimes we're losing it because of erosion. Sometimes we're losing it because of fertilizer damage. Sometimes we're losing it because we built a mall on it.
Right.
And in Michigan, they're losing it because they're building solar farms on it.
In Michigan?
In Michigan, that's a big problem. They're building solar farms on farmland.
Wow.
And I bet you that's happening in a lot of other states too. I think it's a big problem, and we need to buckle down and start addressing that and going and looking for a fix.
Yeah. You'll have to start a new company, or wait till you retire and then tackle it.
My current company can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I need is money, investor.
Right. Yeah.
You know, to be able to attack it on that scale, it takes a lot of product. It takes a lot of manufacturing. It takes a lot of commercial information. You got to educate people.
Yeah. So you'd be wide open to working with the city of Albuquerque or federal government, state of New Mexico on a big project.
Absolutely.
Even just to test the theory that you could do
Absolutely. It. Oh yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. We've seen it often enough. I have on my computer, I have a folder called Success Stories that I have been putting all of our successes into that folder now for 30 plus years.
How many success stories do you have?
Hundreds and hundreds. And some with some very, very large agricultural entities. Some of the largest farming companies in the world have used our product.
Do they continue to?
Yeah, I mean, putting TerraPro's chemical half-life is measured in many hundreds of years. So if you put down TerraPro, let's say you put it down at 1,000 pounds per acre, that 1,000 pounds will remain in that soil for the rest of your life.
Right.
You don't have to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like my lawn at the nursery.
Right.
I don't have to do anything to it ever again. It'll remain a beautiful, healthy lawn.
How often do you water it?
As needed. It's a sandy soil, and as you know, sand doesn't stay wet as well as clay because sand doesn't have a strong electrical charge to it. It has a very low, very weak electrical charge, so it can't hold on to water very well. And so what is holding on to the water is the carbon matrix that I put into it back in 2016 when I built that lawn. Mm-hmm. It's still there. Where normally that kind of a sandy soil lawn would have to be watered every single day.
Right.
In my case, I can go 4 or 5 days without watering.
Okay. In the high desert.
Yeah.
Incredible. Well, Michael, it's been really eye-opening talking to you, and I thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy day.
Oh, thank you very much for spending the time with me.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.